In today's video, we're going to be ranking the top 10 greatest Seattle Sounders players of all time. And I am back from doing Cheyenne things since the last video. What does doing Cheyenne things entail? I'm not exactly sure. That will be the ongoing questions from videos to come. But per usual, I'm joined with Brody, and we basically formulated our top 10 greatest players in Sounders history from 10 to 1. We're going to go through it, why we put them there. And of course, let us know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. If you are subscribed, why have you not liked the video? Before you forget, like the video right now. Nonetheless, let's just cut the chibber chabber and just jump straight into it. So the first graphic we're going to see is our number 10 all the way up to number 4. And then, as I said, we're just going to kind of go through why we put each player. If there's anyone that you guys think should be like honorable mentions and whatnot, throw them in the comments. We just don't want this video to be too long. We kind of just want to cut straight to the point, get into that top 10, because there's going to be a lot of players we're going to have to talk about. So, bang, here is number 10 through 9.
When making these rankings, you got to really put everything together, because like if you just rank this, it could be so easy to put, for example, 9 and 10, to put these guys so far up the list because of what they've won with the club. Obviously, they've been there for almost the majority of the trophies in the last decade, or like the last decade-ish. But when you get to the questions like, okay, would you rather have Jordan Morris or Obafemi Martins, then you're like, okay. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, it's all together. It's accomplishments, it's eye tests, it's stats, and all of it into one. And sure, we got some bias a little bit on some players, but who doesn't? Who doesn't? But yeah, we started off with Jordan Morris. I think Jordan's got to make the cut 100%. I mean, he's second in goals right now. He's going to be first. Easily pass it this next coming up season. He's only like a few goals behind Raul at this point. A lot of that, of course, is longevity, but nonetheless, still will be the top scorer eventually. Two-time MLS Cup champion, CCL winner, also tied first for playoff goals as well. When you look at those accomplishments, it's easy to say that he could be a lot higher on this list, just looking off of accomplishments. Same with Christian Roldan as well, because, I mean, everything that Jordan's won, Christian's won it as well. For me, the reason why I didn't go higher is because, maybe this is wrong with me, but simply it was just, who would I rather have, this guy or this guy? And when it really came down to it, I couldn't take these two over the guys above, and I thought the guys above did enough in their Seattle career, or were just that much better as a player, in my opinion, for them to be higher on the list. But I think if you have a top 10 Sounders of all time, you gotta have Jordan Morris and Christian Roldan. So there they are, 9 and 10.
Yeah, I think definitely with Jordan, I mean, I think longevity plays a huge part in why he is here. Not to like take away anything that he has done and whatnot, but when you're here for what, 7, 8 years, and you get at least like 10-ish goals at minimum each season, it's gonna obviously add up, and that's probably why players like Oba, Freddie, Clint, Rui Diaz, they didn't rack up as many goals because they didn't have the longevity Jordan Morris has had. Like, he has been here through probably the most successful period the club has ever had. So these stats, definitely rack up. But in regards to like an individual season, I don't think, compared to the rest of the guys on this list, like, I think we could count on one hand the amount of times Jordan Morris has had like a clutch game, like, grab the team by the scruff of the neck and be like, you know what, I'm going to take you there. There are a few, don't get me wrong, but for like the amount of time he's been here, there's just not enough. And like, kind of like what you said, when you look at, I think Oba's a good example, I guess. Do you want Obafemi Martins as a striker? Do you want Jordan Morris as a striker? Obviously, like, I don't know why you would say Jordan Morris over Oba, but yeah, that's kind of just to add on to what you said. And I think Jordan and Christian are in good spots. Obviously, we pipped Christian over Jordan. I think, again, it goes back to, I think Christian's more crucial in the midfield and as well his versatility than Jordan is in the forward line, if you guys are getting what I'm trying to say here. So that's why I think we put him over Morris.
It's not like us having Morris and Roldan at the bottom of this list is any sort of diss, right? It's top 10 players. We've had a lot of players in the last, decade and a half. In my opinion, just looking at it, you could make an argument for Jordan Morris as high as 7, in my opinion. Like, I think it's close between the guys ahead of him, just when you factor in everything. Like, him and Roldan, it's just no. I just don't want anybody to think it's a slight having them this low because we've had a lot of great players. You got to remember, we're one of the best clubs. Ever since we've entered into the MLS, we've been one of the best clubs. So we're gonna have a lot of good players, and maybe your favorites aren't gonna be as high. It's not. It's nothing personal. Okay.
So moving on to the first defender on the list, I actually think he's the only defender in this list. In our top 10 is Chad Marshall. I mean, he's probably the greatest defender the Sounders have ever had. I mean, he's probably the greatest defender in MLS history. I mean, is there anything more to say? Like, I think that just greatest defender in MLS history. He's very successful for us. He was the biggest reason why during that period of time we were successful when he was playing with us was because he was in our back line, not only just defensively but even offensively. I mean, the guy was so clutch on set pieces and he was a good leader to have. He's not necessarily like, where's the captain's armband type of guy, but he's a captain with how he plays on the field, which I really liked about Chad Marshall.
Yeah, more of like a lead by example type of guy. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Listen, I got a lot of respect for Chad. Like you said, best defender in MLS history. I think that should be unanimous in my opinion. But he won the MLS Cup with us, Supporters Shield. We don't get a lot of course, we've had a lot of good players, but we don't have many Sounders who've won like individual big awards. He won Defender of the Year twice with us, I believe. Like that is huge. There's not much more to be said about him, man. You could make an argument he could be higher up this list as well. Like he's as good as it gets. He's the standard of the center back position in the MLS. Like everyone's going to be chasing his greatness for years to come. So, he easily, without a shadow of a doubt, belongs in the top 10 of this list. So,
next up is Freddie, which I would argue might be one of the first kind of controversial picks because, in my opinion, I think Freddie's very split in the Sounders fan base. People really either love him or hate him, as crazy as that sounds, because Freddie was a mixed bag for us because, as we all know, he's the guy that scored the first ever goal in Sounders MLS history. He was that guy for us through 2009 to 2012. He was the guy that was on the back of everybody's shirts. Freddie, Rosales, but Freddie was like that star boy for Seattle. Only problem was he could just never score in the playoffs. And I think also part of it is like MLS was young and people I don't think quite understood what talent was. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to be super fast. Doesn't mean they have to be super athletic. And Freddie is not really those two things, but he's like kind of like a modern style techie forward. And I think that kind of hurt him because a lot of fans didn't understand that about the game so early on. And as I said, never scored in the playoffs. Granted, I think one big point of conversation we're going to have in this video is that time with the Sounders, it's you got to compare it to the generation they were playing with. Like, think about the team that Freddie was playing with back in 2009, 10, 11, and 12. It does not compare to even the team now. Like, it's night and day different. And you got to think about where we were at. Like, we only won one playoff game or advanced from one playoff game during Freddie's time, be it because he was the reason why or he wasn't, whatever it may be. All because he never scored a goal in the playoffs, I don't think overshadows all the other great success he's had with us. I mean, he's the all-time leading goal scorer in the Open Cup. He's the all-time leading goal scorer in the CCC, as it's called now, but CCL for the club. Like, and as well won a lot of trophies, Open Cups with us. He also did win a CCL with us. Like, I don't know. For me, I don't know how Freddie doesn't make your top 10 personally, but again, I'm biased because I loved Freddie. And he's my favorite Sounders player of all time. But I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, Freddie Montero, like, kick rocks.
I have to agree as well. Like, you got to have Freddie in the top 10, in my opinion. And, I guess we'll compare him with Jordan because that's the first forward that he's, over in the list. Of course, Jordan has the great benefit of playing with an incredible Sounders roster. You know, maybe 2016 wasn't the best, but after that you got Rui Diaz, and then you really started to build the team into like a powerhouse. And Freddie Montero, I mean, he was our designated player as a 21-year-old kid. He had very good years with us. Like you mentioned, obviously he never won the MLS Cup, but three-time Open Cup champion, like that does mean something, especially back at that time. Like everyone was gunning for the Open Cup, you know what I mean? So it was a big deal. And the CONCACAF Champions League that we won, sure he wasn't our leading scorer in it, but he bagged a few goals. Like he was important to that run as a guy off the bench. And then when it came down to it, like if I just had to ask myself in their peak, would I rather have Freddie Montero or Jordan Morris? Like I would rather have Freddie Montero. I think he's just more of a complete player. And look at the goal. Like guys, that's got to count for something. Look at the goals he scores, man. Like the goals he scores are just, you have to have incredible talent to pull off some of those goals. Like we all know the LA Galaxy goal, and there's many other you can point to as well. But yeah, I think Freddie comfortably slots into this list. If you want to listen, if you want to have him at 10, I'm not even gonna sit here and be like you're out of your mind for that. But like, you gotta have him in your top 10, man. Come on, it's Freddie Montero. You also have to I want to really stress the fact too, third in goals, also third in assists. Like he's a really complete forward. You gotta look at the eye test as well. Like there was not a thing he couldn't do, and he scored headers as well. It's like even though he wasn't the biggest, most athletic guy, like he was getting after it in the box. Like I think he's more than worthy of being seventh on this list. And again, if you want to rotate him with a few guys behind him, like no problem with that. But I guess for us, we wanted to give him more respect than I feel like he gets, and also how he showed up in like the rivalries in Portland. Like he was Portland's worst nightmare, man. Like I don't know how you could be a Sounders fan and not love Freddie Montero, honestly.
Next up is Clint Dempsey. I think Clint's an interesting one because don't get me wrong, I love Clint. Like I would say he's my favorite U.S. men's national team player, and I have a lot of respect for the guy. But honestly, like for as big of the name as he was, and like obviously he's the record transfer in Sounders history, he was a little bit underwhelming. I think definitely due to like the tax he had of like him being the record signing, him like being for like a U.S. men's national team legend, arguably the greatest one. Like it definitely inflates a lot of people's opinions with him. I think he deserves to be in this list 100%, no question. But I don't really think I think six is pushing it. Like that's I think as high as it can get. Like I just can't see, like if some people would make the argument for him to be in the top five, but I can't have him there. Like he did a lot, but honestly, without Obafemi Martins, Clint was not the guy.
I mean, he did have like when Oba left, he did have like good seasons. They weren't on the level of the years he had with Oba, but to be fair, like we never really saw Oba without Clint, and that's not a reason why I would slight Oba if his numbers dropped. You gotta look at like when you look at I sat back and actually looked at the numbers. Like he was putting up like per 90 minutes, he was putting up numbers you see guys now put up. Like it was him and Oba both. That arguably is our greatest ever team. Obviously they didn't win the big one, but it's up there with our greatest ever team, that 2014 season, and it was spearheaded by Clint Dempsey as well as Obafemi Martins. And then just talent wise, like when you look at him, you just like the guy's incredibly talented. He has everything you'd want in a forward. Not the fastest guy, obviously, but really technical, smart. Like can score from both feet, can score from anywhere, and then obviously, he did have this big pedigree coming from the Premier League and what he was with the national team. I still think I wouldn't say he didn't live up to expectations because I still think he had a lot of great years with us, and like he didn't play every single game. Otherwise, his numbers, if you saw it, like if you played those 2014, 2015 years, if he played the full season, like he'd have like jaw-dropping like stats for like single season stats that not a lot of players in the club have ever had, So
I mean, Obafemi Martins, I think we can easily segue into this one. Dude, oh man, I don't know what to say. This guy makes me miss life and miss him and everything he did for us. Like, dude, great man.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to ask me, if you're just gonna say who's the best Sounder player of all time, forget the accolades, forget the trophies, forget any of this. To me, it's Oba. Oba's number one, and that's why his even though his time was so short with us, anyone who saw him play, anyone who saw that season game for game, you can't put him anywhere lower than the top five. You just can't. Like this guy, I'm sorry. He first of all, 2014 should have won MVP. Let's be
Oh,
real. Like
100%.
should have
That
won
one
MVP.
that was like the
That
biggest highway robbery ever. Biggest.
that would have been that's the only that would have been the only team MVP in Sounders history. Like sorry, not team, but MLS MVP got robbed from him. So uh, just to have a season like that puts you in this list. And the fact that obviously we won the Supporter Shield, and just to give that also just to give Clinton a little bit more credit on that too. Like our team was solid around that, but those two guys like carried. I'm sorry, those two guys carried. Whereas like the 2019, 2020 teams, a lot more well rounded in
Well
my
rounded.
opinion.
Yeah.
Those two carried us to
Carried.
a Supporter Shield. You know what I mean? And they brought in, and obviously we had other players like Nagel, Papa, these guys come in and do well. But that's like, are we really gonna like those are nice players? Don't get me wrong, like respect to them. But are we gonna not feel like a little bit that that's those two bringing them into the game, like just making the whole entire team better? And I thought with our time or when they were here in Seattle together, I preferred Obafemi Martins, so that's why I have him slightly higher. But there's just not enough good things you could say about this man. Like if he stayed with the Sounders for an extended period of time, like easily we would have easily been higher on this list. But he'll forever hold a place in my heart, and I can't imagine putting him any lower than the top five in my opinion. So yeah, Oba, big up Oba.
I know. All my homies miss Oba. Okay. Number 4, the Honey Badger, Ozzy. I mean, he just misses out on the top 3. Arguably the greatest CDM in MLS history. He's won everything except for a CONCACAF Champions Cup title, but he's done it all with us. He lifted the 2016 MLS Cup with us. I mean, he has to. He's obviously was going to be in it. I think it's more of some people might have him in the top 3. They might, I would say, maybe switch him out with the guy we have at maybe number 2, maybe number 3. It's really down to preference and how you rationalize GOAT status in this ranking. But for us, we put Ozzy at number 4.
Yeah, and I when I was making my own list and we were collaborating on it, I had Ozzy higher, but it's the guys that we have above him. When you interchange these players, you're not gonna be like, "This is a robbery. This guy should have been." These are all the cream of the crop. Ozzy, man, he's like when you thought of the Sounders, you thought of Ozzy Alonso. Man, he was like he stood the test of time. Man, he played through many eras in the MLS and was still at that highest level. He won the Open Cups with us. He won the Supporter Shield with us. He won the MLS Cup with us. Wish he could have stayed longer. Things didn't work out, but Ozzy needs to get his due, man. He needs to get his due. You can make a case for him to be in the top 3 100%. I wouldn't be mad at you if you had him there. But yeah, Ozzy, man, not enough things you could say about this guy.
But now we move on to the top 3. It's the juicy stuff now. At number 3, we have Stefan Fry.
Listen, I mean, Stephen Fry has won about everything. He's won everything he could win with this team, man. He won the MLS Cups. He was there for the Supporter Shield, CCL, all that good stuff. Was the best player in that CONCACAF Champions League run. Listen, man, if I could have a redo on this list, looking back on it, I think I would have him number 2, to be honest with you. But either way, 2 or 3, he belongs here.
Interchangeable.
Yeah, interchangeable. Like he absolutely belongs in the top 3, 100%. And I mean, he's got some of the most iconic. He's got the most iconic moment in club history. The save. How could you forget about that? And every single time in the playoffs, he always turns it up big, man. Always. You can never, no matter, even when you just, like the last few years, for example, when you're like, maybe Fry's starting to slow down. Maybe it's the year where we start to transition. We get to the big games. He always shows up. He reminds you of who he is. It's awesome. He's completely stood the test of time, and he's still going, and absolutely deserving of number 3 on this list, 100%.
One thing that is not spoken about is so we've been to 4 MLS Cup finals. We've only scored in 1 MLS Cup final. All 4 of them. I don't even think it's an argument. It's just a fact. Fry is the one that has shown up in every single final. We were poo-poo in 2020, but Fry was good. We were poo-poo in 2017, but Fry was good. 2016, he's the reason we won it. Obviously, 2019, different story. But like 3 of those
Yeah.
4 finals, the only reason we were in those games, we won one of them, is purely because of Fry. I mean, obviously, he won the final MVP award in 2016, but that isn't spoken like about enough or even at all. But moving on to number 2 that we said is possibly interchangeable, up to preference, Raul Ruidiaz.
Yeah, I mean, he's the club's top goal scorer. And yes, he's going to be passed by Jordan Morris soon, but goals per game, not even close. Like, he's the most clinical forward we have had, and we will likely have for a very, very long time. I mean, this guy,
How long is
MLS Cup
very?
winner. You know, hopefully not as long as I'm imagining, but dude, getting a guy like this, he's the best ever finisher, bar none, in this club's history. And we've been an MLS team for 15 or so years, and he's the best that we've had when it comes to that department. And he's also clutch as well. Always showed up in the playoffs, and then obviously that we all know that 3-1 LAFC that against that 2019 LAFC team. We go to their arena. They're the team that broke all the records, and then we just come in and just whoosh. What did I tell you? Whoosh! And then Raul just showed up big time, bagged a goal in the final as well. I mean, he's not gonna, bro. I know things ended a bit sour with him.
Dude, things definitely ended sour, and I feel so bad
Yeah,
for him. And you know whose fault that is the clubs, because they just like, I mean, there was an interview that recently came out, like, because now he's a free agent, he could say whatever he wants to say, and pretty much was saying like he wanted to leave, and he told the club he wanted to leave, like, because he's like, I'm not playing, like, it's kind of like mad disrespectful, like, I'm not playing, so like, well, just let me go. I'm cool with like us terminating my deal. Like, I'm fine with it. And we're just like, nah. Like, I don't
yeah,
know, man. Things like him and Ladero, just things ended so sour in my opinion with them because we just have attachment issues.
yeah. I mean, I just hope that in the minds of fans, I know it's fresh, and the last moments of that we have in our minds of him is him not being the same player, and not really playing much, and having a bit of you know troubles, I guess, with his contract situation and all that stuff. But you guys, please remember 2018, 19, 2020, 2021. Raul Ruidiaz was. I mean, I never thought I could get better with Oba, but he is the best striker in the club's history, in my opinion. And I wish we had him, for a lot more years, before he came here. I wish we had him when he was bagging goals in Liga MX, But like I said, if I could do this list again, I probably would have Fry too. But Raul makes a very good case to be number 2, in my opinion, as well. So
Then that leaves us with number 1. I mean, is there any question? Is there any debate? Is there any intro we have to give to this man?
nope.
Mr. Ladero, number 1. Not really much arguing here. It was very obvious, cut and dry, cookie cutter. There's no number 1 list without Nicholas Ladero. Most complete player, has won pretty much everything. He's never won a supporter shield, but he's won everything else. Longevity, trophies, goals, assists, clutch factor, leadership. He's pretty much the perfect potion you stir up, and bam, comes out Ladero, and is arguably one of the greatest signings in MLS history. So I think it's a good way to end things off at.
There's not much to say with this guy. I mean, you could list off all his accomplishments, but we all know what they are. We all saw firsthand what this team was when we had prime Nicolas Ladero in the lineup. That 2016 season, man, we're like, we suck. We're at the bottom of the table. Like, why did we get rid of Obo? What are we gonna do, man? And then this guy comes in and just goes, "Get on my back, boys! Get on my back, boys!" And he leads us to the promised land. And yes, could have played better in the Cup final that year, but nonetheless, he got us to where we needed to be, man. And that, like, things like that very rarely happen. Just to have a summer signing like that, out of nowhere, just come in and change the landscape of our entire season. We thought we were. I mean, if there was relegation back then, we would have gone down without this guy. And then instead, he just goes, nope, all the way up to the very top. And then you got 2019 as well. I mean, spearheaded one of probably our greatest team. I mean, you could argue 2019 is our best ever team. He was the engine of that. He was the engine of all those years, to be honest with you. It just everything started and ended with this guy, and we'll be forever grateful. And if the Sounders do ever get one of those statues, we got a Edgar, Ken Griffey one. But if the Sounders ever get one, it's gonna be Ladero. So.
Cool beans, boys and girls. That's the end of today's video. If you guys agreed with us, disagreed with us, let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. I already know there's going to be a bunch of you guys going to be like, oh, bro, these guys don't know ball. But, it's another episode of two guys that think they know ball. And you just got to let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Make sure, if you haven't already, to smash the like button on today's video. Subscribe, because we're on the road to 2K. So let's get there. And boys and girls, I hope you'll have a lovely day.